Before I start, I think it's worth mentioning that we booked this trip before Trump became president. For the second time. And it seemed like there was crazy news coming out of America almost every single day. But either way, we've just spent a month over there, and it's time to recollect all the things that we experienced. So join us as we travel across many states, vast wilderness, snow-capped mountains, and many concrete jungles, as we check out and see if America is still worth traveling in 2026. We opted to travel as light as possible with one piece of checked baggage each and backpacks to take on the plane with us. In hindsight, Adelaide Airport is quite relaxed and not at all busy compared to the ones we were going to see over the next month. The last time I flew on a plane, both of my eardrums actually ruptured, so I was a little bit worried. Crossing the Pacific, we were going to be on the Airbus A380, which I was pretty excited to be in. Plus, I'd never been on an international flight before. And the demand mustn't be that strong right now, as you can get return flights from Brisbane to a variety of destinations in America for only 760 Australian dollars for March of this year. With the complimentary headphones on, we said goodbye to Australian soil for the last time. And as I also learned, there was not much room in economy, but the food was at very least pretty decent. And if you're going to be doing an international flight, I would highly recommend paying a little bit more for greater legroom. We finally got to LAX, which is where we passed through customs, and thankfully we didn't seem to have much problem. I guess I didn't look too suspicious. Given that we had a few hours to kill in the airport, we opted for one of the airport lounges, which actually turned out to be one of the best ideas we had on the trip, as it came with the ability to have a nice hot shower, something I sorely needed after the last 20-something hours. Jet-lagged and ready to go to sleep, we were told that our flight to Seattle was going to be delayed. It ended up being delayed 11 separate times, and eventually we were on the tarmac in the plane and in the skies once again. Throughout the trip, we had some pretty bad experiences with American Airlines, but we eventually did make it to Seattle, and my bag thankfully also made it thus far. Coming from Australia's hot summer, we were a little bit shocked by Seattle's absolutely frigid weather. And at around midnight, we were finally at our hotel room. I must say, it was a little bit dated, sure, but it was cozy, and most of all, the heater definitely worked. So there we go, I've just rested. We're in our little hotel room in Seattle. It's very cozy. I've just had a bath and around 12 hours sleep, which was much needed after not sleeping for almost 2 days. It's about 5 degrees Celsius outside the hotel room, and Sabrina's already been out there exploring. So I think it's time we go and take a look. Alright, our first food from Seattle. It turns out that my card's pay and wave thing wouldn't work, so I had to withdraw money from the bank. Yay for $5 USD ATM fees. Anyway, we've got McDonald's. We've got a medium quarter pounder, I think that's what I got. And this was about $13.60 US. You do the conversions, or I'll put them on the screen below. Let's dig in and find out if it's any good. Oh, let's take a look. I'm very hungry. This is like the first proper meal I've eaten in like 24 hours. Oh yeah? Is the burger any good? I'd say it's a little bit more salty than the quarter pounder patty you'd get in a McDonald's back in Australia. Also, the patty definitely looks a bit thicker. That's pretty good. A bit more salty though, I must admit. But I quite enjoy that. And now it's time for the fries. These were pretty well loaded in their bag. Almost no salt on those. Not too good. And last of all, we got the Fanta. That's about what you'd expect. Very good. And a trip to America wouldn't be complete without a little bit of consumerism. I was honestly just surprised by how many different sweets you could buy here. Although to be fair, I shouldn't have been that surprised, but it was also cool to see a half-empty failing mall. Seattle really has it all. It would turn out that Seattle would actually be one of our favourite cities. It was relatively quiet, so it was honestly a good introduction to the hustle and bustle of some of the larger American cities we were going to see. Did you know a good chunk of Seattle's population is of Irish descent? I didn't. And yeah, the food here was actually pretty darn good.
Tastes like Diet Coke.
Okay, fair enough.
Hopefully a good representation of some of the food we're going to see and taste during the rest of our journey. The food as well as drink sizes here are absolutely huge. The Space Needle was also pretty big. Sadly, it was closed when we went after hours, and if we'd gone during the day, there's a chance we may have been able to go up into it as well. And on this day, Sabrina had booked us a tour up to Mt Rainier, which I would later find out is still an active volcano. And and on our way we got to pass through some pretty scenic little American towns, and as we got closer to the mountain it got snowier and snowier, and the temperature absolutely plummeted. It was honestly like a winter wonderland. It was truly awe-inspiring to see. I believe the other tour guests had bailed due to the temperatures and snowfall expected, but oh man, they really missed out. This was something you just have to see for yourself, and I'm hoping the footage I shot really shows you just how scenic and peaceful this place really is.
We did not expect to see that much snow, and this is actually the first time Sabrina and I had ever seen snow. It was truly magical, and in hindsight, I could have spent a whole week there at Mt Rainier.
During the warmer months, there are apparently around 240 miles of trails that you can walk around Mt Rainier, and at this time of year you can see it's a little bit less accessible, and as our hike continued, the snowfall definitely began to pick up. We were on a trek to Cougar Rock Campground. Some very warm clothes and really good boots are absolutely recommended. Having an experienced guide with you during this time of year is also a good idea because it's likely you're not going to be able to read a lot of the signs. With fallen trees and heavy snowfall forecast, you're definitely going to want to watch where you step because there are a lot of steep cliffs that drop off into the rather picturesque river below. It's honestly hard to believe that during the warmer months, all of this snow would be gone, and while some people might not like trekking through this kind of terrain, it really is one thing that I would highly recommend experiencing.
Ooh, the guy's here.
If you go to this part of the world during the winter, I would highly recommend also trying some snow, just to avoid the yellow stuff. But thankfully it doesn't look as if any dogs or humans had been here on this day we were trekking. I was actually surprised just how warm I was getting. I had to open up my jacket, and at one point I even took my beanie off. But with all that snowfall, I'd rather not have my head freeze. We never actually ended up making it to Cougar Rock Campground, but this was absolutely a hike that I'm glad we did on our journey. Seeing all of this terrain and walking through this picturesque snow-capped mountainous area is something you've got to see for yourself. If you're going to Seattle and enjoy a good hike, this is absolutely a place you've got to go to.
And if you're traveling abroad, having an eSIM for internet connectivity is super important. We relied so heavily on an eSIM, and that's where today's sponsor, Nomad eSIM, comes in.
To get started, simply download the Nomad eSIM app from Apple's App Store or the Google Play Store if you're on an Android device. Nomad eSIM makes it super easy to set up and activate your eSIM. Be connected before you even land in your destination. It only takes a few easy steps, with a handy tutorial available to make it even easier.
Nomad eSIM offers a wide variety of plans throughout various regions of the world, so there's a plan that'll suit your needs.
Be it an unlimited data plan for longer trips or capped data plans if you're only going for a few days. Using my discount code, you can get data for as low as 54 cents per gigabyte in the USA. Best of all, there's seamless coverage in over 200 destinations for reliable connectivity.
Check that your phone is eSIM compatible. Simply type *#06# in the keypad, and if an EID number comes up, you're all good to go. Use my promo code and click the link below to find out more and save. And once again, thanks to Nomad eSIM for sponsoring today's video.
You can purchase now and activate later on your trip to take advantage of this current offer. Is there a chance the track will bend? Not in your life, my YouTube friend. Today we're starting our day off with a stereotypical American diner, and hopefully we'll get a very nice breakfast.
And when it came to American coffee, we were not fans.
And just like most of the world, we'd heard about the American portion sizes. And they weren't kidding, these were some very hard meals to finish.
Now, tipping happened in a few different ways while we were in America. They would either bring an FPOS thing to the table, you select a tip amount, you tap your card and you're done with it, all is paid for. But at some places, they would bring out the check, you'd give them your card, they'd take the card and check away, do the transaction, bring you back your card, and then leave a thing where you're supposed to write a tip. And they would then somehow get the money. They would either do the transaction again with the card information they'd already saved, because at that point you would leave with your card and that's the end of it. But it might be because I've got an international travel card, but I was never charged any of the tips we left when we paid using that method.
The tipping culture does feel quite unfamiliar to us, but Seattle aesthetically felt pretty familiar, and while we were here we thought we'd try out the Seattle Pike Place Market, which was honestly a lovely place to go and explore, with a lot of really interesting things on display. We also thought we'd try some American foods from the supermarkets, and I was impressed just by how cheap the Arizona iced tea was. I could easily see myself going to Seattle again in the future, and since we have actually now taken this trip, it turns out that you can now get a direct flight from Australia to Seattle, so you wouldn't even have to go through LA anymore, thankfully. On this trip, we plan on trying a lot of different fast food options, Shake Shack being one of the first we've tried, and it was very good. And like most places after 6 PM in Seattle, this big dome thing was closed.
Seattle was honestly a great place to start, but I must be honest, it was pretty sad and a little bit depressing to see just how many homeless there were.
As we had learnt, taking Ubers and ride shares, they were pretty expensive, and it turns out that getting to Seattle's main airport is pretty easy on the train, and thankfully far cheaper. By this point, I had really grown to not like airports very much, but thankfully flying on Delta throughout this trip had actually been pretty painless.
I must say this, Grand Theft Auto 5 did not prepare me for just how huge LA really is. We ended up taking an Uber to get to our hotel in Hollywood, and that took about an hour from LAX, as we really could not be bothered trying to deal with public transport to get there.
Given what we've heard about LA, on our way to Hollywood, the traffic was chaotic as we've been led to believe, and we did finally get to the hotel. It first seemed pretty nice, but honestly it had quite a few issues when it came to smell and the air conditioner seemingly not working half the time. That was a little bit annoying, and at least we got some little bits of coffee making stuff included. With the sun going down, we thought it was a great time to walk down Sunset Boulevard, where someone actually tried to sell me crack. That was a pretty interesting introduction to Los Angeles life. After surviving our walk down Sunset Boulevard, we made it to Raising Cane's, a fried chicken place that Sabrina really wanted to try, and yeah, it was pretty tasty. It was now time for some much needed rest. While in Los Angeles, we thought we'd check out the iconic Rodeo Drive, which is known for its incredibly high-end shopping, and you're going to see a lot of interesting cars. I've never seen a McLaren in person, and they've even got cars hanging next to the road, but this would actually happen to be my favourite car that I've seen so far. And all of this stuff was a little bit out of our price range, but I also found it hilarious to see just how many Tesla Cybertrucks there were around. I don't know why, but I find them absolutely hilarious. The palm trees in Los Angeles really do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the vibe. This is a place you definitely have to experience at least once in your life. It's also pretty interesting just how much dirtier it gets as soon as you leave Beverly Hills.
I was honestly very surprised to see all these little delivery food robots. They were pretty hilarious and often they did get stuck.
Although it was getting late, Sabrina wanted to do some more vintage clothes shopping, and she definitely found a few pieces she liked. But we were getting quite hungry at this point, so we thought we would try In-N-Out Burger, which was very, very busy, but definitely worth the wait. And I feel as if Hollywood Boulevard is something you should see at least once in your life. But the novelty does wear off pretty fast. Considering how many people drive cars around here, it seems like finding a place to park them is a real nightmare. If you're a ship enthusiast like me, visiting the Queen Mary in Long Beach is absolutely something that should be on your itinerary. It was pretty awesome to see in person, and there's still that old submarine there. And as far as merchandise goes, there's actually quite a bit of pretty clever and cool stuff. It truly is like stepping back in time, and yes, you can actually stay here overnight and sleep in the Queen Mary. And as you can see, a lot of the decor looks pretty original, or it's been restored. And it's also quite novel seeing it against a modern, modestly sized cruise ship, which was actually a lot bigger than the Queen Mary. That big dome is now actually used as a cruise terminal, and when we arrived we thought a lot of the traffic were people arriving to see the Queen Mary, but nope, they were just boarding the neighbouring cruise ship. You can actually get Starbucks coffee on board, because this is America after all.
Seeing the Queen Mary was honestly one of the main things I wanted to see in Los Angeles, and it was totally worth the trip down to Long Beach, but it was a little bit sad to see just how quiet it was on a Sunday with pretty much perfect weather. So hopefully in the future, it continues to get the love and maintenance it deserves.
And if you're feeling a little bit more hungry, the Promenade restaurant actually does serve up some very decent food at what I would consider somewhat reasonable prices, especially given the location. But given how far away Long Beach is from Hollywood, we ended up taking an Uber to get here because taking public transport would have taken upwards of 2 hours each way. While in America, we did want to try at least one theme park, and considering how expensive Disney seems to be and how crowded it can be as well, we thought Universal Studios was worth a shot. Immediately, we were pretty impressed by just how big the place was, with some really intricate theming. And if you enjoy Harry Potter, you've definitely got to try a butterbeer, which is kind of like a creaming soda. Yeah, it was pretty good.
Oh, that is really good.
The main Harry Potter ride was pretty cool and a really good experience. All the rides, as far as I can tell, were included in the fare price. Although if you want to get some sweets, you're going to be charged a lot of money. And if you're a fan of The Simpsons, apparently there's Simpsons stuff here as well. I thought The Simpsons were owned by Disney, so I'm surprised that they were in a Universal theme park.
Hiya, Homer!
If you're looking for a somewhat cheaper alternative to Disney, I think you're going to have a good time at Universal Studios. Another area which is pretty new is the Super Mario Land, which is very well themed to Mario as you'd expect. I haven't actually seen the Super Mario movie, although I've got a pretty good idea by playing the games what to expect. The merchandise on sale, as you'd expect, is pretty expensive, and there is genuinely quite a large variety to choose from. For lunch, we thought we'd give Krusty Burger a go. The partially gelatinated non-dairy gum-based beverage, along with a loaded hot dog, actually weren't that good, honestly.
Wait times at Universal Studios were honestly pretty much non-existent, at most maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And I would totally recommend doing the backlot tour. That was a lot of fun.
The backlot tour was surprisingly interactive, and I would not recommend bringing a big camera because it's quite likely it's going to get wet. I actually shot this whole trip to Universal Studios on my iPhone. Sets and various cars that they'd used in films and TV shows was pretty awesome to see. The crash plane from Tom Cruise's War of the Worlds actually uses real parts from a Boeing 747 apparently. I had an absolute blast going to Universal.
Not the gumdrop Chapman!
Eat me!
If you're after an inexpensive little meal, Taco Bell is definitely an option. Honestly, for the money, it was pretty reasonable.
I'd heard about the mythical Baja Blast for many years, and since we went to Taco Bell, I was lucky to try it, and it was actually pretty good.
Ah, Santa Monica, in the wintertime. And if you're a fan of Grand Theft Auto 5, this place features quite prevalently in the game. And on a day like this with ideal weather, it is great for a long walk. Stopping for what they call concrete and a milkshake wasn't exactly cheap, and for some reason 2 separate groups of people asked us where we bought them from, why we were sitting in the restaurant we bought them from. What on earth is in the tap water here? If you've come all the way down to Santa Monica, you've definitely got to go for a walk along Venice Beach. There are lots of shops and occasionally some pretty decent deals to be found as well, but also a lot of tourist traps and scammers, so stay vigilant. Our American experience wouldn't be complete without at least one trip to the Hard Rock Café. The food was decent, but it was quite odd seeing a young band of kids playing Green Day covers on the stage for some reason. And on this day, we were going to take it pretty easy. Denny's was fairly decent for a breakfast, but they got Sabrina's order wrong even though we corrected them 4 separate times. And another place Sabrina wanted to check out was the house used in one of her favourite TV shows, Charmed. Apparently they used this house for exterior shots, and it's pretty cool to see that it's almost the same all these years later. The Godfrey Hotel actually does have a rooftop pool, so we thought it would be nice to unwind and have a splash. LA is definitely a mixed bag when it comes to walkability and public transport, as we'd learned. Now that I've been to LA, I really don't see myself coming back. It's just a bit too chaotic and spread out for my liking.
One free thing you can do in LA is go to the Griffith Observatory. There are excellent views of LA and a lot of space-related stuff within. Now came the part of the trip that I was dreading the most, driving in America. In our country, Australia, we drive on the left-hand side of the road and sit in the right side of the car, so this was quite a bit of adjustment to get used to.
The drive to Yosemite is about 6 hours, around 300 miles going through Los Angeles traffic. I would admit that it was very stressful, and I never want to do it again. But along the way, there was a lot of varied scenery, and we did stop for lunch in Bakersfield for some Jack in the Box. Yeah, I didn't like it too much, I'll be quite honest. It seems like pretty much every place in America sells burgers. Americans really love their burgers, apparently. A taxidermied bear, people fighting with a windmill featuring an American flag in the background. Yeah, I think I'd seen enough for one day, and eventually we did make it to Yosemite Valley Lodge. With outside temperatures around freezing, it was great to get into our nice warm and cozy cabin. For the money, I actually thought it was pretty good, and I was sure to treat myself to a bath. The nearby gift shop has a lot of merchandise, actually a lot more than you'd think, and I did love all the little random snacks. That stuff is right up my alley, and of course I got another cheap Arizona iced tea.
The dinner we had at Yosemite was honestly one of the best meals we'd had of the trip, and considering how remote the location was, it was pretty reasonable.
Americans really do like putting large amounts of butter on everything, but in all seriousness, the food here was phenomenal.
Opening the curtains in the morning and seeing that view of the mountain was truly breathtaking.
If you love hiking and the outdoors, this is an absolute must. Well, yes, it was very cold at this time of year, and there was some sun, and thankfully clear sky for part of the day. But of course, being in the valley, it did get quite dark and cold in the late afternoon. So start your hikes as early in the day as you can.
In hindsight, I wish we'd stayed there for a whole week. It was truly awe-inspiring. Walking all the trails, seeing all the squirrels and snow-capped mountains, this is truly something you've got to see for yourself.
Even in the middle of winter, the amount of wildlife was plentiful, and thankfully we didn't come across any bears. They do warn you about this though, so be on the lookout and perhaps don't bring a picnic basket. Yogi Bear could be just around the corner. And if you're coming all the way to Yosemite, be sure to stay as long as you can here. There are so many different trails and hikes that you can do, and I absolutely loved my time here. But what I didn't love was the drive to San Francisco, which, as it says on screen, is about 4 hours away before you do any stopping. As I did learn, Americans really do love to speed, and trying to find a car park here in San Francisco on the cheap is almost impossible. Before we settled in for the night, we thought we'd take a little stroll around the Bay Area, with a few places still open, like this huge candy store. And if you're not in the mood for candy, you could watch bread makers make bread through the nearby window. After a long day of hiking and driving, it was very much time for some rest. San Francisco was definitely a bit of a breath of fresh air compared to LA. Everything was a little bit more laid back and the weather was honestly a bit cooler. I was surprised by just how warm LA really was, even in the middle of winter. And of course, there are even more Tesla Cybertrucks around. Applebee's is what we had for lunch, and it was actually pretty reasonable. I'd never heard of this place before, and yes, we did pay using the Flappy Bird FPOS machine. Nearby is Pier 39, which is a nice little boardwalk with many shops. You could grab a Nathan's Famous hot dog, or go on the various rides. But there's also a view of Alcatraz Island, and the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Even during this time of year, the pier was surprisingly busy, and with the sun going down, Sabrina felt like some ice cream. And while this was very delicious, it was super expensive for such a small amount. And as we should have already known, American portion sizes for the main meals were quite huge. We could have easily shared a single plate. We were up fairly early the next day, as we had a destination, and that destination was actually on the water, as we were about to take a boat ride out to Alcatraz Island. Sadly, we wouldn't be going on the island itself, as apparently that was closed for maintenance, so we'll be going around the island instead. This tour wasn't all that expensive, and we were partially refunded since we weren't actually going on the island itself. And I'm pretty sure that's the cruise ship that ended up getting stuck in Sydney Harbour when COVID first hit. I always wondered why so few people actually survived escaping from Alcatraz Island, and after seeing the currents around the island, it's not too surprising. Trying to swim away from there would be nearly impossible. And we did get to see the island up pretty close, and it appears to be in disrepair. But that's probably why it's perfectly suitable as a ghost tour.
And on this day, I didn't realize just how cold the boat trip was going to be, and I ended up getting a cold as a result.
And while we were a little bit disappointed that we couldn't go on the island itself at this time, seeing the Golden Gate Bridge up close was great to see. Out of all the places we visited in America, so far, this is probably the first where I would consider living here, if it wasn't so expensive. It's got a really great vibe, and honestly, even in the wintertime, temperatures and weather were pretty great. We were sure to go past what they call the Painted Ladies, even though they were almost completely obscured by the trees growing out the front. And if you're a fan of hippie stuff, well, there's no shortage of that either in San Francisco. San Francisco apparently has the world's last manually operated set of cable cars. And yes, it was quite exhilarating going down some very large hills, but a little bit unnerving seeing that it's just one operator controlling the brakes with a huge lever. As far as cities go, San Francisco is very walkable and the public transport is also excellent. There are plenty of great places to grab a bite to eat, as we learned during our stay. Once again, we were up very early to take another flight, and once again I spent way more than I should have getting a meal at the airport. Today we're flying into Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps, staying in an Egyptian-themed hotel.
Considering just how much of a bad rap the Luxor resort gets here on YouTube, I honestly thought it was fine. Although, the amount of staff trying to sell you on cosmetics and, worst of all, timeshares was pretty annoying though.
Look, when we booked this room, it was actually a pretty competitive price, but oh my god, a $51 resort fee per day is absolutely criminal. The room itself didn't exactly have the greatest view, and we weren't actually in the pyramid itself, but the neighboring tower. And outside of the strip, this is pretty much what Las Vegas looks like, just basically an endless sprawl of housing. If you're not a fan of the Egyptian theme, you might not get a lot out of the Luxor, but if you're a fan of Titanic-related stuff, there's a lot to see. Although I must admit, some of the merchandise was a little bit in poor taste and a bit morbid, given exactly what happened to the Titanic. But people are here on the strip to spend money. There are no shortage of ways to lose your cash, be it at a casino or at a very expensive restaurant on the strip. Going here was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Sabrina and I, so we did indulge and go to Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen. We both got the 3-course meal and some drinks.
I've never had a scallop like that. Just try it.
Hell's Kitchen, without a surprise, was very expensive, but the food was absolutely phenomenal. We loved every bite of it.
I made sure not to leave a single crumb behind, and oh my god, that was an expensive dinner. Taking off from Harry Reid Airport, another once-in-a-lifetime opportunity thing Sabrina and I did was take a helicopter trip into the Grand Canyon. Honestly, even though this is a desert, I was very surprised by just how varied the terrain could be. It was truly beautiful seeing Lake Mead and Hoover Dam, places that I'd seen in one of my favourite games, Fallout New Vegas. This was a real joy. As we descended into the canyon, our pilot played the Jurassic Park theme over the headsets, which was a little bit hilarious, and we touched down without any issues. Yes, this was expensive, but a memory I don't think I'll ever forget.
Landing in the canyon honestly felt pretty surreal, and I thought it was a perfect time to propose to my longtime partner. Thankfully, I didn't drop the ring over the edge of the cliff, and she did say yes.
I don't think there's much else that could top off such a great day. The Grand Canyon tour is absolutely worth it, and best of all, they take you back over the strip at sundown. This is a phenomenal view, and I was able to get some really good shots from my camera, although it was quite bumpy. Newly engaged, what better place to go to than the Rainforest Café? Sabrina had never really heard of this place, although I had seen the infamous YouTube video where a guy goes to all of them in America. The food was actually pretty decent, although the simulated rain shower that happens every once in a while was a little bit weird. Next up, we were going to try the Adventure Dome in Circus Circus, a rather notoriously dingy, run-down casino and resort. Although I think it has quite an old-world charm to it. We wound up just playing some random arcade games because the entry price to the Adventure Dome was ridiculous. We didn't have much luck at the bowling, but the claw machines were surprisingly rewarding. Ooh, we got the green guy.
And on our first try, we won Luigi.
Yahoo!
Yeah, now we're really racing.
Eventually, the racing game did work, and with Luigi on my team, there was no way I could lose. While the rest of my game was pretty bad, eventually I did get a spare.
The strip was honestly a bit chaotic. There are a lot of panhandlers and people begging for money. I politely declined a rapper's CD, and his response was, "What, you don't like black people?" So yeah, they're really trying to guilt you into giving them money.
Just like LA, Las Vegas was cool to see once, however, I don't think I'd ever want to come here again. Getting into New York was actually surprisingly easy given how good the train system is. And after a long journey, we could have a nice rest in the Central Park Hotel, which charged a large resort fee like most of the other places we traveled to. Being in New York, the room was pretty small, but at least it was fairly modern and tidy. The view, on the other hand, wasn't exactly great.
We were very fortunate to see New York just before the huge snowstorm hit, and our modestly priced hotel was also in a very good central location.
That location being right next to Central Park, which was rather picturesque. Seeing all the little squirrels gathering their nuts just before the snowstorm hits, it was getting very cold at this point. They must be able to sense when something is coming. And taking a walk through the city, we ended up going to a place called Carnegie Diner and having a very, very good meal. And once again, we were overwhelmed by the huge portion sizes. Overall, the food on this trip has actually been pretty good, and I don't think I've ever seen a slice of cake that big before. And moving on to Times Square, this was another place that I really wanted to see, but given how busy and chaotic it was, seeing it once was probably enough. And it was somewhat scary seeing all these people almost getting run over while trying to take photos. We did our best to avoid the tourist traps like the mascot characters, which will charge you a pretty penny to get a photo with them. New York really has a vibe that I can get down with.
There are definitely many observation decks throughout Manhattan, but most of them you do have to pay a pretty penny for. It was so cold the night we went up there that we couldn't even feel our hands after a few minutes.
And since Sabrina is a fan of stuffed animals and toys, we thought we'd go to the Feo Schwartz toy store, which is also in the 30 Rock Center. There were definitely a lot of pricey plushies to choose from. With the temperature rapidly dropping and the pending snowstorm on its way, we made the most of the relatively snow-free New York. Once again, all of the animals were out in full force, gathering nuts and getting ready for the snowy days ahead. Were we going to be completely snowed in? The news reports definitely made it seem as if that might be the case.
With the temperature plummeting, we thought it was a good time to try and do some things indoors. The Met Museum seemed like a great place to go.
A lot of people seemed to have the same idea, as the Met Museum was very busy. It was pretty surreal to see all the marvelous creations. The amount of artistry and intricacy in some of these pieces was truly astonishing. Seeing perfectly preserved furniture from hundreds of years ago, tapestry from the 1600s or something, and even mechanical automatons that date back centuries is truly remarkable. Having stayed at the Luxor, I had definitely seen my fair share of Egyptian-themed stuff, but seeing the real deal, on the other hand, was still quite extraordinary. Seeing culturally significant and priceless artifacts sure makes me hungry, so that's why we thought we'd try Upthai, not far from the Met, and as you would guess, they specialise in Thai cuisine. It was easily some of the best Thai that I had ever had, absolutely worth the money.
Advocating for me, and they were challenging these companies on my behalf.
After a few days of clear weather, the blizzard finally hit. And yeah, it was quite difficult to traverse, and the hail was hitting you in the face like nails, and the snow was only getting thicker as we walked across the city. Thankfully, there is a train stop that leads us right to the museum, because on a day like this, spending it indoors might be the safest thing to do. We didn't exactly get to see all the things we wanted to, because the museum ended up closing early due to the snowstorm, but what we did see was quite remarkable, and definitely worth the train ride here if you're in New York.
We also walked past our first celebrity, Jimmy Fallon of all things, at the museum.
At this point, the storm was quite whimsical, and everyone I think was actually having a good time. But of course, all that snow was eventually going to turn to black sludge. And oh my, that snow was starting to get pretty deep. Options for dinner during the blizzard were unsurprisingly limited, but we went to a different Carnegie Diner once again, and they served up some amazing food. I must admit that I'd seen enough snow on this trip. No more, please. With the worst of the snowstorm, at least for now, mostly past, the temperatures outside were still very cold, so we decided it was best to try to do something else indoors. We were going to see the 9/11 Museum, which is obviously where the World Trade Center towers used to reside. This was a very somber and sad place in a lot of ways. It's definitely a place of mourning for lots of New Yorkers who would have experienced this firsthand almost 25 years ago. Seeing the twisted remains and debris that is left over is quite haunting. Knowing just how many people's lives were lost here on September 11th, 2001 is quite a somber reminder of just how mortal we really are. I quite enjoyed going here and would definitely recommend visiting if you're planning a trip to New York City. And given how much snow had fallen, it was also pretty incredible to see just how quickly the roads were cleared and normal traffic, as well as walking along the footpaths, could resume. Given the less than normal weather that New York had been experiencing, I think that's probably why it was far less busy than we were anticipating it to be. And after a lot of walking around the city, we thought we'd try a place called Bubby's. That served up some absolutely delicious food. Dining in New York had been pretty good overall. It's really a great melting pot of different cultures and flavors to experience. Is there anything more quintessential New York than steam rising from the roads? No, that's not smoke, that's steam. Steam from the underground heating system New Yorkers are having. And something else I hadn't yet tried in New York was a bagel. You'd better believe there are some really tasty options to choose from. Leaving Manhattan Island, we took the subway under the East River to explore a bit of Brooklyn. This is another part of New York that you've absolutely got to go visit. You get a truly wonderful view of the Manhattan skyline, and just as you can see, a lot of ice is forming on the East River. And I just couldn't help but step on that hard snow. The Brooklyn Bridge is also another iconic site that I would absolutely recommend walking over. In this kind of weather, you should definitely layer up, as it was absolutely freezing. Along the way, you'll also see many locks and weird things people have tied to the bridge, as well as a view of the Statue of Liberty. I can really see it already, very small of course. And with Chinatown close by, I was in the mood for a succulent Chinese meal. And this is definitely one place where you're going to find just that. Hua Feng No. 1 is currently a very popular spot on social media. Heck, that's how we found out about it in the first place.
The delicious $6 pork and rice was absolutely worth lining up for, and yes, there was a bit of a line, but it was absolutely worth the wait.
For only $6 Freedom dollars, this is an absolute bargain, a real institution of New York's Chinatown. And while the shop itself looks pretty dank, the pork and rice was scrumdiddlyumptious. I was really surprised just how resilient New Yorkers really are. It was honestly like business as usual, even though they'd just been through a torrential blizzard. For dinner, we tried another social media famous spot, Los Tacos No. 1, which served up absolutely fresh, delicious tacos and some very interesting Mexican lemonades. While in America, we had to absolutely check out at least one game of NBA basketball. It was the Sacramento Spurs versus the New York Knicks, and honestly, the vibe was immaculate. We had a great time, and our seats were relatively inexpensive. Trust me, they could have been way more expensive if we were to sit anywhere near the court itself. The food was also pretty decent, and the popcorn being heavily discounted because we bought it in the second half. This will be an experience I remember for a very long time. And since this was a journey we'd been planning for years, a lot of places we went to eat were on the more expensive side. But in New York, you're guaranteed to find some good deals when it comes to pizza. There's so many different places to choose from, with cheap slices that are absolutely delicious. After a few days, most of the snow was now a little bit blackened by all the cars on the road, and you'd best be careful where you step because you never know when you're going to step on a squirrel that's hiding underneath the snow. And at this point, while the snow had mostly stopped falling, it was still freezing cold, a great time to get out on the ice. However, I didn't want to break a leg, and if you wanted to have a drink, you'd be out of luck if you were going to try the fountain. And if you were going to try eating some snow, I'd be very careful as a lot of it was quite yellow, for reasons that I think is pretty obvious. And if you're after a rather inexpensive way to see New York from the air, the Roosevelt tramway is definitely one option. It takes you over to Roosevelt Island, but you do actually have to pay for each traveling direction. You sadly can't just stay on as it travels back in the opposite direction. Once again, we found ourselves at the Carnegie Diner. They honestly have some really reasonably priced food for the money, and the steaks here are absolutely phenomenal.
When in New York, you absolutely have to see a Broadway show. We went to go see The Book of Mormon, which was absolutely hilarious. It's pretty obvious that it's written by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, of South Park fame. For our last night in New York, we thought we'd try a Thai place. BKK on West 56th Street did not disappoint.
I don't actually recall the exact amount this food cost, but you got several courses paired with wine and some interesting drinks. It was genuinely some great Thai food. We thoroughly enjoyed our time in New York. There's so much to do, eat, as well as see.
I actually came back from America 21 kilograms lighter. And what I mean by that is, they left my suitcase in Dallas. I eventually did get it back, and thankfully nothing was broken. Look, there are definitely a lot of legitimate reasons for not traveling to the USA at the moment. And there are definitely a lot of places and cities I would avoid. Honestly, it feels like the place is becoming a dictatorship with a narcissistic man-child at the helm. Democracy is super important and no one should be above the law, but it seems like those with money and unchecked power can get away with practically anything. We did enjoy our time in America, but as a place to travel to, things are looking pretty shaky. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've at least found it informative. And once again, we enjoyed our time over there, but it was not cheap and things are looking pretty shaky for the future. There are a lot of beautiful and wonderful things to see, but it is very disheartening and sad to see so many really bad things also happening right now. I hope for all my American viewers that things do improve in the future. You have a beautiful country, but there are a lot of problems. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video informative, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like your name in the credits of my videos and a few other perks, feel free to join as a channel member. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.